I never imagined retirement would find me standing in my own summer house at midnight, listening to my daughter clink a champagne glass while my wife sobbed behind a closed bedroom door. After 33 years wearing a uniform for Northport Fire, from rookie recruit to battalion chief, I thought I'd learned how to read danger before it happened. That same habit made me cut a trip short and drive up to our lake place 3 days early. It was supposed to be simple. Thanksgiving week, the family together, a long weekend of pies and fishing and Margaret's ridiculous stuffing recipe. I pulled into the gravel driveway at 10:45 p.m. The place was lit like a beacon on an otherwise black shoreline. That alone put me on edge. Margaret turning early never stayed up like that. My boots crunched on frost-scalloped pebbles. There was laughter from the back deck, bright and celebratory, and underneath it, quieter, a thin, ragged sound, crying. I circled the house, staying in shadow the way we taught rookies to size up a scene. The deck wrapped around the back, a few steps down to the water. 3 figures were outlined against the porch lamp. My daughter, Angela, 34 now, her dark braid catching the light. Her husband, Aaron, lively and loud with a champagne flute in hand, and a stranger in a tailored jacket who looked like he sold other people's dreams for a living. I didn't go through the front door. For me, instinct wasn't just about fires and wrecked cars. It was about the way ordinary danger smells. This smelled wrong. Silver Pines Resort, the stranger said, voice sure as a product pitch. Cannot be beaten. Waterfront like this moves quick. You folks won't be difficult to convince. Angela laughed, a sound with an edge I didn't like. They're past the prime, Dad, she said, loud enough to carry. Mom forgot to sort the utility payments last month, and your calendar's getting sketchy. We can manage it for them. We got a plan. My jaw went tight. My boots stopped. They turned as one. Champagne glasses suspended midair. For a moment I just listened. The cold air, the soft slap of waves, the rustle of a jacket. Then I stepped toward them and said, anyone care to explain what I just heard? Margaret and I had built that house. Not bought and polished, but hammered and coaxed into being. 28 years ago, it was a near-rotten cottage on Silver Lake. I rebuilt every joist on my summer leave, salvaged the dock timbers, learned a thing or two about glass windows and trim. Margaret planted the perennial border herself, delphinium and lupin and that stubborn patch of catmint she insists brings butterflies. We bought it because we loved quiet water and coffee that steamed in the mornings while the loons called. It was where our kids would learn to bait a hook. It was where I'd watch the sun set when I finally traded in the pager for a fishing pole. Our kids were grown, their lives threaded with their own choices. Angela had been a force since she was small, sharp, decisive, and when she loved hard. Aaron was recent. They'd been married 5 years. He described himself as a small business operator, then as an events manager. I called him a salesman. Tyler, our younger son, lived in the city. He was quieter, more methodical, a provincial operations analyst who had a knack for tracking things other people missed. When I'd retired, Margaret and I thought simplicity would be the reward for 33 years of alarms and council meetings and the soft ache that comes with accumulated sacrifice. We moved into town for the winter. The house would be for summers and holidays, a place to bring grandchildren someday. That's the life we planned. That night, I had driven up because something in my chest told me to. A tiny ember, an old habit, the kind that once kept men alive in a burning house. On the deck, Angela's voice was bright and oddly formal as she said, Dad, we were going to wait until Thursday, but circumstances changed. I'm so sorry you came up early. I never miss a family dinner, I told her. You never said anything about champagne toasting a development deal. Aaron smiled with that practiced ease that had fooled me before. Bob, relax. We're just talking options. This area is prime for redevelopment. With the right buyers, you'd get more than you think. Options, I repeated. For my house. The dock I rebuilt. For the garden Margaret fusses over. For the pictures on the wall. I let the sarcasm sit there like a coal. The man's smile flickered. Then Angela said something that hit like a cold slap. Mom's been confused lately. She mixed up her appointments. The bills, they were almost shut off last month. We think it's time for a cognitive assessment. Once that's done, and the medical opinion comes back, It'll be routine to set up power of attorney. For your safety. My name is Robert Albright, Bob to most, and I am 61 years old. 33 years in the department taught me to keep a clear head. It also etched into me an intolerance for half-truths. My lungs remembered smoke. My hands remembered the weight of tools. I've been pulling people out of wrecks 6 months before. I am not feeble. I also know the difference between misplacing keys and losing the ability to reason. A chill ran down my spine. What doctor? I asked. Angela hesitated. Dr. Harold Van, an elder care specialist. We consulted with him last month, she said. He thinks a formal assessment is the only responsible thing. I realized then that they'd recalibrated the language of help into the language of control. I'd seen it in other cases, a worry nibbling into a justification, for their own good, for their safety, words that let people step around what they intended to take. Come inside, I said. We'll discuss it over coffee. Margaret, are you all right? From behind the kitchen door came the sound of a woman who was not merely upset. She was shattered. Margaret was on the bed, hands crumpled into tissue, her shawl untied. I found her clutching a folder like it was an anchor. It's all on paper, she said when I sat at her side. Her eyes were red, makeup streaked. She said I signed things. She said I agreed to hand everything over. I can't find my glasses, and they told me I wasn't making sense. You signed nothing, I told her. We'll get this sorted. In the living room, Angela and Aaron were speaking low. The stranger, who introduced himself as Lionel Rhodes, investment and development, hovered at the edge, glancing at the kitchen doorway like a man checking a market. I thought of all the calls I'd made as a chief, to hospitals, to grieving families, to mayors when a bad winter demanded cooperation. I was confident handling emergencies, but this felt like a slow, cunning kind of burn. It was personal, deliberate. Their plan had the texture of careful planning, and the tone of the conversation carried a terrible certainty. Those documents, I said, standing. You brought them? Angela slid an envelope across the coffee table. Inside were forms. A durable power of attorney for finances, another for health decisions, and a letter on clinic letterhead from Dr. Harold Van describing significant cognitive decline. It was signed, dated, and stamped. The date was October 22nd. I frowned. That weekend, I'd been at a fishing tournament outside the province Tyler, and I had gone together. There were photos of that trip with timestamps. I'd been out of range and out of jurisdiction on those dates. I'd not met this Dr. Van. You should tell me how this happened, I said, keeping my voice level. Angela looked away. Aaron leaned in. Look, Dad, this is messy, but you can't keep pretending none of us are aging. It's a fact of life. Fact, I said, and fraud is a different fact. I wasn't around October 22nd. Where did these signatures come from? Angela's face tightened. For a heartbeat, I caught the expression of the little girl who used to climb my lap while I worked on the dock. Then she blinked, and the mask of daughter slipped into something colder. The utilities were almost off, she said again, and the reed of justification wrapped itself around the lie. If you'd seen last month's statements, we were worried. I opened my phone and pulled the online account. The payments had been made, as they always were, bank transfer each month, an automatic schedule Margaret had set years before. Margaret had paid them twice that year, including a lump in September. The thing you notice in a fraudulent plan is the assumption that the victim is incompetent. They count on small lapses, keys misplaced, appointments forgotten, to build an impression. I poured coffee. Margaret sipped, and for a moment her hand was steady. Maybe I forgot the date, she said quietly. I did misplace my keys the other day. She laughed weakly. I always put them in my jacket. There it was, a small human slip that had been weaponized into a verdict. Their reasoning was a wedge. It was the same technique used by predators everywhere. Small doubt, inflated into a narrative of incapacity. We didn't come to fight, Angela said. We came to help, to protect you. You protect me by stealing my voice? I asked. You protect her by trying to sign her life away. She fell silent. Outside, a loon called distantly. The single note stretched thin across the dark water. I remember the nights we spent in smoky kitchens after calls, The way Margaret would sit with a blanket and a thermos, waiting. I'd never thought I'd be the one standing guard in my own home, watching a daughter triangulate a case against her mother. The stranger, Lionel, finally cleared his throat. "Mr. Albright, I think we can do this quickly and cleanly. We put the property into a family trust. You move to a nice assisted community, one with medical staff and activities. They're very modern. We handle the development, you get compensation, and your family watches over you." He said compensation with a dentist smile, as if we'd been injured at a crosswalk and were owed restitution. Aaron folded his arms, the bravado gone hollow as the story began to reveal itself in the edges. "You want to sign away my home because you think I can't change a furnace filter?" I said calmly. I wanted to slap the condensation off my chest, to call every colleague from the department and say, "Is this a joke?" Instead, I kept the voice slow, like one gives directions to a volatile burner. Angela's jaw trembled. "Dad, we're scared, okay? We need options. Aaron knows people. If we had some equity, we could dash." Her voice cracked. For a moment, she seemed genuinely frightened. "That's what this is about," I said. "Money, not me." She flinched as if struck. Lionel's lip thinned. "Mr. Albright, the legal instruments are standard. We had a physician evaluate Mrs. Albright. The assessment dash." "Who did the evaluation?" I asked, angling for any inconsistency. "I did what we teach new officers, gather the facts. Documents are only as powerful as the chain of custody behind them." Angela handed me a business card with Dr. Harold Van's name and a phone number in another province. I dialed. It went to voicemail, Van and Associates, Elder Care Clinic. I left a curt message. Inside the house, Margaret still shook. She kept saying, "I don't know why they would do this, Bob." I answered the questions, and I must have said something wrong. Her voice was paper thin. I read the letter again. Observations consistent with early onset cognitive issues. Recommend immediate guardianship. It had an institutional look, letterhead, logo, a handwritten note in the margin. The date again, October 22nd. In the upper right corner of the letterhead, someone had typed an invoice number. There was also a forwarded email string printed beneath. Details of home safety concerns, missed appointments, and recommend immediate intervention. Tyler wasn't due until Thursday. He had a flight delay initially. That was the plan. I steadied myself and called him. He picked up on the second ring. Hearing his voice was like an intravenous line of calm. "Dad, everything okay?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Get up here. Bring your laptop." "You want me to come now?" "Yes. Bring anything you can use to check these documents. And call Mom's bank." Tyler arrived in exactly 2 hours, cold-eyed and quick. He hugged Margaret the way you hug someone who had been at risk. He set his laptop on the coffee table and opened tabs with the focus of someone who likes puzzles. "What do you have?" he asked. I pushed the envelope across. He scanned the letterhead and furrowed his brow. "This letterhead is wrong. Van runs a chiropractic clinic in Winnipeg, not an elder clinic. He's not an elder care specialist. And this invoice number, it's been reused from a corporate training video company." "Corporate training?" Lionel stammered. He looked smaller than he had on the deck. Tyler clicked through to archived records. He found emails, previous attempts Aaron had made to borrow money from family, a pattern of small loans that escalated. He traced a transfer to an offshore account and the last 3 deposits to a gaming account. "Aaron's debt," I said, the last piece landing. "How much?" Tyler read aloud. $375,000 in losses over 20 months. Payments to a gaming company. Multiple declined loan requests to family. And look at this, an online payment to an actor who has done corporate spokeswork. He was hired under the impression it was a testimonial shoot. "And the clinic?" I asked. Tyler found an online listing for Van and Associates and the number on the card. "This number routes to a voicemail box that isn't answered. Their domain was registered last year using a privacy service. Dr. Harold Van is a licensed chiropractor. He denies ever issuing this letter when I called. He's furious. Looks like we have a forged evaluation." I felt a clear, hot anger swell. I had pulled people from burning houses and stood with families when the worst had happened. I'd never expected to be betrayed by blood. It has a distinct taste, a metallic aftershock, the kind that leave your mouth dry. I called the local police non-emergency line. An officer came out. She was in her 40s, efficient and direct. Officer Mara Deller took the envelope, glanced at the printed forms, and then looked at me. "Has anything been signed?" she asked. "Have you given them any documents?" "No, we didn't sign anything," I said. But they came prepared. They have forms. They have a fake letter. They acted like professionals. Officer Deller's face read, like someone who had seen this kind of thing in other cases. "We'll take statements and photograph everything. If there's sufficient evidence of fraud and attempted coercion, we will pursue charges." We waited in a thin, shallow bubble of time while officers took statements. Lionel grew nervous. Aaron looked ashen. Angela sat and sobbed with her head in her hands. Sometimes she was the broken child again. Sometimes I thought this too was a performance. Around dawn, phone calls were made to people I never wanted to talk to in this context. Registry offices, bank fraud teams, a lawyer who could look at the documents. The more the officers checked, the worse it looked for the couple on my couch. Tyler had assembled a folder on his laptop. Screenshots of gambling account statements, wire transfers, the Winnipeg chiropractor's message denying the letter's authenticity, email invoices to an actor who said he'd been hired under false pretenses. There were also recordings, messages Marcus had left with threats from creditors months before. They had escalated fear into a scheme. When the officer returned, she was decisive. "Mr. Albright, the evidence suggests fraud, identity theft, and administering a noxious substance. We need to take Mr. Ryan in for questioning." Aaron's surname, I'd only learned that night, was Ryan. She advised caution. Don't confront them alone. We moved forward with a slow, legal clarity that felt oddly procedural after the emotional backward thrust. Aaron was arrested that morning, the cuffs clicking like the seal on an old toolbox. He protested, then quieted when he realized the officers had more than a hunch. They had receipts, bank records, and a victim who'd refused to be gaslit. Angela wasn't arrested then. Officer Deller spoke to her gently but plainly. "We will continue to investigate. You should find counsel." Her voice was measured the way a surgeon's hand must be. As a patrol car drove away, Margaret slid into a chair by the window, still shaking. "What did he give me?" she asked at last, the words thin. I remembered buying sleeping tablets once for a friend when she couldn't sleep on a long flight. The image came back messy and small. A teaspoon, tea, the clink of porcelain. "You'll tell them," I said. I felt terribly adult and terribly foolish at once. For trusting, for loving, for not noticing the tiny calculus that had been running in my own house. But Margaret's eyes met mine, and I saw the woman who'd taught 10,000 children letters and song and patience. She was not my property to be proffered and signed away. Later, at the station, officers found evidence in Aaron's bag. Blister packs of sleeping pills and an empty sachet of crushed tablets. The pharmacy records showed a recent prescription. Margaret, tested at the hospital, had traces of sedatives in her system that matched the tablets. It was damning. Aaron's arraignment was firm. The charges listed fraud, identity theft, and administering a noxious substance. His lawyer argued his innocence and painted a picture of desperation. The judge set bail, and it was denied. Angela wept that day the way someone who'd made a terrible choice might. "We were scared," she said over and over. "I was trying to help." There are words like that. They try to reshape the world after the fact, to make remorse sound like a motive rather than a confession. It isn't that simple. People are messy. They break. Love can be used as a mask for selfishness and fear. The winter dragged, and the court dates came and went like a bad season. Tyler and I sat in the gallery when hearing dates were set. The prosecutor arranged files with the precision of someone who had the public's trust at heart. The evidence was assembled. Falsified letters, pharmacy records, the deposit trail showing Aaron's losses to a gaming platform, the payments to actors hired to create fake testimonials. Angela's conduct was scrutinized. Did she know? Did she ask someone to make a fake evaluation? The truth was tangled. She'd benefited from the plan, and yet she'd also been manipulated by the very man she purported to protect. That argument should have been her defense, in her indictment. At trial, a real Dr. Harold Van testified from a small office across the country. He told the court he'd never signed that letter, had never been contacted in a clinical evaluation, and had been stunned to discover his name used in that way. The hired actor, who'd thought he was on a corporate shoot, testified that he'd been paid via an intermediary when he provided a performance, never knowing it would be used in fraud. The jurors heard testimony from Margaret and me. We both described the night and the slow realization that something inside our home had been deliberately turned against us. Margaret's voice faltered but carried the truth. I am not incapable. I misplace my keys like anyone. I make small errors, but I am not empty of reason. The prosecutor framed the case with an old human truth. Vulnerability is not an invitation to theft. Our legal system recognized that those who prey upon family trust must face consequences. Aaron was found guilty of fraud, identity theft, and administration of a noxious substance. The judge imposed a sentence that reflected the severity of the betrayal: 6 years in federal custody, with no early parole for the first 3. It was a harsh line in the sand, enough to let the community see that elder abuse by family or associates would be punished with weight. Angela did not go to prison. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge in a restorative arrangement and accepted conditions: long-term counseling, suspension of her real estate license, community service, and an order to attend a public restorative justice proceeding. It was not punishment that would level the scale. It was a framework designed for repair. She also filed for divorce. The town hall meeting where she read her apology was a strange, brittle thing. She stood at the podium, visibly smaller than I remembered her, voice shaking. "My name is Angela Reed," she began. "6 months ago, I betrayed my parents. I drugged my mother and attempted to sign away their life's work. I did it because I was desperate and ashamed. I hurt the people who love me most, and for that there is no excuse." What passed after those words was silence, public, heavy, judgmental. Some of the crowd nodded with the stern sympathy of people who had watched too many trust betrayals happen quietly. Others looked away. No applause, no absolution. After the meeting, we didn't speak. There were messages I read once and then filed unread. There were also photos that appeared in a small folder Tyler showed me. Angela's phone pictures of her away from the town, clean and sober-looking, a candid caption: 19 months clean. You can measure a life by days like that, by the slow arithmetic of rebuilding. When the case closed, the practical matters remained: lawyers, property paperwork, insurance claims. The lake house remained ours. We winterized it, fixed a few boards on the dock, and boxed up the clutter that had accumulated like sediment after a storm. The difference between losing a house and keeping it was not only legal. It was also about how much fight you had in you and the people who would stand with you. Community reaction was mixed. There were those who called us brave, others who muttered that we should have seen it sooner. I accept the skepticism. Parents always believe they see what's happening. But the point isn't our failure. The point is that trust was weaponized against us, and the law had to put it back in plain language. This is abuse. Margaret asked once in the kitchen, while we washed dishes together in late spring, "Do you ever think about forgiving her?" I dried my hands and looked at the steam drifting up from a sink. I thought about the life we'd made, the porch I'd nailed down, the hands we'd held in hard rooms. Forgiveness is not an event. It's a series of decisions that may or may not culminate in a phone call. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." Tyler visited often. He and his wife, Nora, brought their 2 kids to the lake that summer, and the house hummed with small life again: laughter, flour on a countertop, muddy shoes tracked in a mudroom. Children do a better job of erasing grief than any of us are sometimes brave enough to do. They play without asking permission from the past. Angela attempted to reach out. She sent a letter requesting a meeting. Margaret put it in a drawer and did not open it for 3 months. "If and when we can handle it," she told me, "we will decide. But this house is built of bones and nails and stubbornness, not guilt." Time altered some things and hardened others. The lake thinned from blue to glass and then cracked with spring ice each year. We returned to the dock I had built and taught our grandchildren how to bait a hook. I showed them how to hold the rod steady and how to respect a fish. There's a trivial heroism in that, the daily, ordinary love it takes to keep a place in the world that belongs to you. Angela completed her court-ordered programs. She lost her license and part of her professional life. She lost trust. She rebuilt slowly and with visible effort. Regular meeting notes from counselors, a few sober anniversaries posted on social media, a job at a small cafe in another town. There were photos Tyler showed me sometimes. Angela making coffee, a small smile, a mug in both hands. Those pictures are a quiet, unadorned testament to the fact that people can change in increments that don't always feel big enough. When the sentencing came for Aaron, I sat in the courtroom and tried not to let my face show what the night had been to me. Grief is a tempering heat. It makes you reckon the cost. The judge's words felt like a measure not only of punishment, but of a statement of collective values. Families should not be marketplaces for the desperate. At home, Margaret mended the garden in May. She planted lupin and a patch of dill for the grandchildren to crush between their fingers. She made a pie the way she always did and insisted the recipe would stay the same. The house stayed ours, not because we insisted on ownership as a material thing only, but because the life inside those boards continued. The smell of coffee at dawn, the slow wash of sun across the floor. Sometimes at night, I would walk out onto the deck and listen to water breathe against the shore. I would think of the moment I'd first stepped into the house and how bright the future had seemed. I thought of small betrayals and great recoveries. I thought of the difference between protection and theft, between care and coercion. Forgiveness, when it came, was not a sweeping gesture. It was threaded through practical choices, allowing a phone call once the legal orders were in place, hearing an apology read in a town hall that broke no laws but exposed the marrow of a family's pain. We did not reconcile fully. Reconciliation implies a mutuality that needs time and evidence. What we found instead was life that moved forward around an absence. We accepted visiting from Tyler's family. We welcomed the laughter of small people into our living room. We let days lengthen. There is a lesson I tell people when they ask my advice on elder care. Love your parents enough to ask the hard questions, but love them more than to let someone else decide their fate in a room without them present. Bring a lawyer. Go slowly. Verify documents. Don't let fear alone determine action. Fear can be a bully's friend. At the end of the day, the house is still ours. The dock I rebuilt creaks in the same place. Margaret and I sit with thermoses sometimes, and we watch the reflection along the water. We talk about forgiving. We talk about the ridiculousness of worrying over small errors. We talk about the grandchildren, the pies, the slow ritual of life returning to ordinary rhythms. Sometimes late, I stand on the deck and whisper a thanks into the dark. We survived, Margaret told me one evening as the last of the light bled off the lake. Her hand was in mine. We did, I agreed. And in the quiet that followed, I thought about the strange architecture of trust, how strong it can be and how fragile, and how we had learned to guard it better. I thought about the way betrayal can come wrapped in a daughter's voice, how the law can help tidy up the ruin, but it doesn't always fix the heart. I look at the house, at the boards I replaced with my own hands, and I feel the stubborn pride of the man who chose to keep building. We taught our grandchildren how to skip stones and how to respect each other. That is repair. That is how. In the end, we kept what mattered.